A telegram clutched in her trembling fingers. Olivia Langley stood alone on the weathered platform of Council Bluffs, Iowa. As the last billows of steam from the departed train dissipated into the crisp autumn air of 1875. The small bundle in her arms stirred, and she looked down at the sleeping infant, her heart breaking with each tiny breath. The man who had promised to meet her husband-to-be was nowhere to be found. Final call for Omaha, train departs in 5 minutes. The station master bellowed, his voice carrying over the now empty platform. Olivia's eyes burned with unshed tears as she fumbled with the wrinkled telegram one more time. Await my arrival. Stop. Council Bluffs Station. Stop. October 15th. Stop. Your future husband Thomas Wellington. Stop. She had traveled for weeks from Boston with her sister's baby, believing in the promise of a new life, only to discover that promises could be as insubstantial as morning mist. Madam, station's closing soon. You got somewhere to go. The station master's voice was gentler now, tinged with concern as he approached her. He was supposed to be here, she whispered, more to herself than to him. I don't understand. The baby stirred again, small fists pushing against the woolen blanket as a whimper escaped tiny lips. Olivia gently rocked the child, her niece Emma, orphaned just 2 months ago when influenza had claimed her sister and brother-in-law. With no other family and facing destitution, Olivia had answered Thomas Wellington's advertisement for a mail-order bride, carefully explaining her situation with the baby. His letters had been kind, understanding, or so she had thought. I can direct you to the boarding house, madam, though it's a fair walk from here, the station master offered, scratching at his gray-flecked beard. Before Olivia could respond, the sound of spurs jingling against wooden planks caught her attention. A tall figure emerged from the station house, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the setting sun. The man moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin, though he paused when he spotted Olivia and the baby. Pardon me, madam, he said, his voice a deep rumble that somehow managed to be gentle. Couldn't help overhearing. You seem to be in a difficult situation. Olivia straightened her spine, years of proper Boston upbringing asserting themselves despite her circumstances. I'm quite all right, sir. Thank you for your concern. The man stepped closer, and Olivia could see him clearly now, tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His clothes were trail-worn but clean. Denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a dust-covered Stetson he now removed, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. Ethan Xavier, madam, he introduced himself with a slight bow of his head. I run the Double X Ranch about 12 miles west of town. The baby chose that moment to let out a hungry wail, and Olivia felt her composure starting to crack. She bounced the infant gently, murmuring soothing words that did little to quiet the increasingly distressed cries. Ethan Xavier's eyes softened. Sounds like the little one's hungry, and you look like you could use a seat and a hot meal yourself. He hesitated, then stepped closer. Let me hold you both. Olivia blinked in confusion. I beg your pardon, the baby, he clarified with a gentle smile. Let me hold her while you rest a moment. And then, if you're willing, my wagon's just outside. I can take you to Martha's boarding house in town. It's a respectable place, and Martha makes the best apple pie west of the Mississippi. Olivia hesitated, years of caution warring with desperation. The baby's cries grew louder. I understand your caution, madam, Ethan said softly, but it'll be dark soon, and Council Bluffs isn't the safest place for a lady and infant after nightfall. I give you my word as a gentleman, I only want to help. Something in his steady gaze convinced her. With careful movements, she allowed him to take the wailing bundle. To her surprise, his large, calloused hands cradled the baby with unexpected tenderness. There now, little miss, he murmured, and the baby's cries softened to hiccuping sobs. That's better. Olivia watched in amazement as Emma quieted under the cowboy's gentle rocking. She's usually not comfortable with strangers. Animals and babies, Ethan said with a self-deprecating smile. always seem to take to me better than most people do." He nodded toward her carpet bag. "Is that all your luggage, madam?" "Yes," Olivia admitted, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "I had to sell most of our belongings to purchase the train tickets." Ethan nodded without judgment. "Well then, shall we get you and this little one settled for the night? Tomorrow's soon enough to figure out what's next." As they walked toward his wagon, Olivia found herself telling him about Thomas Wellington and the unanswered telegram she'd sent 3 days prior to announce her arrival. Wellington. Ethan's brow furrowed as he helped her onto the wagon seat, still holding Emma with remarkable ease. "Tall fellow, red beard, owns the Mercantile on 5th Street. Hope flared in Olivia's heart. "Yes, that's him. Do you know where he might be?" Ethan's expression turned grim as he handed the now calm baby back to her and climbed up beside her. "I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news, Miss Langley. Thomas Wellington passed away 2 weeks ago. Typhoid fever took him quick." Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. "Dead, but the telegram must have been sent before he fell ill," Ethan said gently, flicking the reins to set the horses in motion. "I'm mighty sorry to be the bearer of such news." The wagon rolled through the streets of Council Bluffs as Olivia tried to process this devastating information. Her carefully constructed plans lay in ruins around her. No husband, no home, no future for herself or Emma. "I don't know what to do," she whispered, the reality of her situation crashing down upon her. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, guiding the horses through the twilight-shrouded town. "Miss Langley, I know we've only just met, but I have a proposition for you. It's not charity," he added quickly, seeming to sense her pride. "It's an honest job offer." Olivia looked at him questioningly. "My housekeeper, Mrs. Abernathy, is getting on in years. She's been after me to find her some help, especially with winter coming on. The ranch is large, and there's more work than she can manage alone." He kept his eyes on the road ahead. "I can offer you a position as her assistant with room and board for you and the little one. It would be temporary, of course, just until you decide what you want to do next." Olivia studied his profile in the fading light. "Why would you do this for a complete stranger, Mr. Xavier?" His hands tightened slightly on the reins. "My mother came west as a young widow with me in tow. If not for the kindness of strangers, we wouldn't have survived our first winter." He glanced at her, his expression earnest. "Sometimes a helping hand at the right moment makes all the difference." Olivia considered his offer. A respectable position, shelter for the winter, and time to make new plans. It was more than she dared hope for after the devastating news about Thomas Wellington. "The ranch is isolated," Ethan continued, "but it's peaceful. Good place for a child to grow." He nodded toward Emma, who had fallen asleep in Olivia's arms. "And Mrs. Abernathy would be thrilled to have a baby around. Never had children of her own." As the wagon pulled up in front of a neat 2-story building with Martha's boarding house painted on a swinging sign, Olivia made her decision. "I accept your offer, Mr. Xavier," she said with quiet dignity. "Emma and I would be grateful for the opportunity." Ethan's smile transformed his weathered face, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "Excellent. We'll depart after breakfast tomorrow if that suits you." As he helped her down from the wagon, their hands touched briefly, and Olivia felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest. For the first time since stepping off the train into emptiness, she felt a glimmer of hope. "Mr. Xavier," she said as he gathered her carpet bag, "thank you for holding us both when we needed it most." His blue eyes met hers, and something unspoken passed between them. "Sometimes, Miss Langley, we all need someone to lean on, even just for a moment." Martha's boarding house proved to be as respectable as Ethan had promised. The proprietress, a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s, welcomed Olivia and Emma with maternal concern, especially after Ethan quietly explained the situation. "Poor dear," Martha clucked, leading Olivia to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor. "To come all this way only to find such heartbreak. But you're welcome here, and that precious little one too." After arranging for a basin of hot water and some milk for the baby, Martha left Olivia to settle in. Exhausted from the emotional day, Olivia fed Emma, bathed her, and laid her in a makeshift cradle. Martha had provided a deep drawer lined with soft blankets. As she washed away the dust of travel from her own face, Olivia caught her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. Dark circles shadowed her gray eyes, and her chestnut hair had escaped its pins to fall in untidy waves around her pale face. She hardly recognized herself. "What have we gotten ourselves into, Emma?" she whispered to the sleeping infant. "A strange town, a ranch in the middle of nowhere, and a man we've only just met." She sighed, sitting on the edge of the narrow bed. "But he has kind eyes, doesn't he? And hands that held you so gently." She thought of Ethan Xavier's offer and the quiet dignity with which he'd made it not charity, but a fair exchange of work for shelter. In Boston, such an arrangement would have raised eyebrows, but here in the West, pragmatism seemed to outweigh rigid social conventions. Sleep came swiftly that night, and when Olivia awoke to Emma's hungry cries at dawn, she felt more rested than she had in weeks. She dressed carefully in her second-best dress, a practical navy blue with minimal trimming, and pinned her hair in a simple but neat style. If she was to be a housekeeper's assistant, she would need to look competent rather than fashionable. Breakfast at Martha's communal table was a hearty affair of flapjacks, bacon, and strong coffee. The other boarders, 2 traveling salesmen and an elderly couple, were polite, but minimally curious about the young woman with the baby. In a frontier town like Council Bluffs, newcomers were common enough not to warrant excessive interest. Martha, however, pulled Olivia aside as she prepared to meet Ethan. "Ethan Xavier is one of the good ones," she said firmly. "Known him since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. His mother, God rest her soul, raised him right. You'll be safe at XX." Olivia felt a weight lift from her shoulders at this unsolicited endorsement. "Thank you, Martha, that's reassuring to hear." "Mind you," Martha continued with a twinkle in her eye, "he's not hard on the eyes either, is he? 32 years old and not married yet, not for lack of interested parties. I can tell you that." Before Olivia could respond to this unexpected line of conversation, the sound of a wagon pulling up outside announced Ethan's arrival. Martha hurried her to the door, pressing a wrapped bundle into her hands. "Some sandwiches for the journey and a bottle of milk for the little one." Ethan greeted them with a tip of his hat, his wagon now loaded with supplies. "Ladies," he said with a warm smile, "fine morning for traveling." The 12-mile journey to XX Ranch took most of the day, as the wagon moved at a steady but unhurried pace over increasingly rugged terrain. Ethan proved to be a companionable travel partner, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the area without pressing Olivia for details about her own life. When Emma grew fussy around midday, he suggested they stop by a small creek for a rest. While Olivia tended to the baby, Ethan built a small fire and heated water for tea, producing cups and a packet of leaves from his saddlebag with an almost apologetic smile. "Mrs. Abernathy insists I never travel without proper tea things," he explained. "Says coffee's all well and good for cowboys, but tea is civilized." Olivia accepted the steaming cup gratefully. "Mrs. Abernathy sounds like a woman after my own heart. She practically raised me after my mother passed," Ethan said, settling on a nearby rock. "I was 12. Father had died years before in a mining accident, so it was just Mother and me on the homestead. When she took sick..." He paused, his gaze distant. "Mrs. Abernathy stepped in, kept me fed, kept me in school when I wanted to quit, made sure I grew up to be the man my mother hoped I'd be." "She sounds remarkable," Olivia said softly. "She is." Ethan's smile returned. "Stubborn as a mule, sharp as a tack, and with a heart big enough to take in a half-wild boy and turn him into something resembling a gentleman." As they continued their journey, the landscape changed from rolling prairie to more varied terrain, with stands of trees breaking up the open grassland. By late afternoon, they crested a rise and Ethan drew the wagon to a halt. "There she is," he said with quiet pride. Double X. Below them stretched a valley cradling a substantial ranch. A large two-story house of weathered wood stood at its center, surrounded by several outbuildings, corrals, and a barn that could have housed 20 horses comfortably. A creek wound through the property, its banks lined with cottonwoods and willows. In the distance, cattle dotted the hillsides and horses grazed in a nearby pasture. "It's beautiful," Olivia breathed, genuinely impressed by the scope and order of the ranch. "Started with 50 acres and 6 cows," Ethan said, his voice warm with pride. "Now we've got over 2,000 acres and nearly 500 head of cattle." He clicked to the horses, and the wagon began its descent into the valley. "Taken 15 years of hard work, but it's been worth every callus and sunburn." As they approached the main house, a tall, spare woman emerged onto the porch, shading her eyes against the lowering sun. When she spotted the wagon, she straightened her apron and marched down the steps with military precision. "You're late," she called, though her stern tone was belied by the affection in her eyes. "Had dinner warming for an hour." "Sorry, Mrs. Abernathy," Ethan called back. "Had to take our time with the little passenger." Mrs. Abernathy's expression changed to one of astonishment as she noticed Olivia and the baby. "Ethan Xavier, what have you gone and done now?" Ethan laughed, bringing the wagon to a stop. "Nothing scandalous, I assure you." "May I introduce Miss Olivia Langley and her niece Emma?" "Miss Langley, this is Mrs. Eleanor Abernathy, the true ruler of Double X Ranch." Mrs. Abernathy's weathered face softened as her sharp eyes took in Olivia's travel-worn appearance and the bundled infant. "Well now," she said, her tone gentler. "You both look like you could use a hot meal and a proper rest. Come inside, child. Questions can wait until you're fed." The interior of the ranch house surprised Olivia with its comfort and understated elegance. The floors were polished hardwood, partially covered with colorful woven rugs. The furniture was substantial but well-crafted, and the walls held several landscape paintings of remarkable quality. It spoke of prosperity tempered with good taste rather than ostentation. Mrs. Abernathy led them directly to the kitchen, a large, warm room dominated by a massive cooking range and a sturdy table that could seat at least 10 people comfortably. Delicious aromas filled the air, making Olivia's stomach rumble embarrassingly. "Sit, sit, Mrs. Abernathy insisted, already moving to the stove. "Baby first, does she take milk? I've got fresh goat's milk, easier for little ones to digest than cows." "Yes, thank you," Olivia said, touched by the older woman's immediate concern for Emma. "She's just 5 months old," while Mrs. Abernathy prepared a bottle with practiced efficiency. Ethan quietly explained Olivia's situation. The housekeeper's expression grew increasingly sympathetic, and by the time he finished, she was nodding firmly. "Of course you'll stay," she declared, passing the prepared bottle to Olivia. "That east room gets lovely morning light, perfect for a nursery. We can move the sewing table to the parlor." Dinner was a simple but delicious affair of pot roast, potatoes, and fresh baked bread. As they ate, Mrs. Abernathy outlined what Olivia's duties would entail: helping with cooking and cleaning, assisting with preserving the garden's bounty, and general household management. "I'm not as spry as I once was," the older woman admitted. "These stairs are getting harder on my knees, and the winter canning nearly did me in last year." "I'm a quick learner," Olivia assured her, "and I'm not afraid of hard work." "Good, because there's plenty of it," Mrs. Abernathy said with a laugh. "But it's honest work, and you'll find no better place for that little one to grow." She cast a sidelong glance at Ethan. "Might do the master some good too, having a child around, put some thoughts in his head about the future." "Mrs. Abernathy," Ethan protested, a flush creeping up his neck. "Don't Mrs. Abernathy me, young man. 32 years old and not a prospect in sight. Your mother would be beside herself." Olivia hid a smile behind her napkin as Ethan squirmed under his housekeeper's pointed gaze. There was clearly deep affection between them, despite or perhaps because of Mrs. Abernathy's blunt manner. After dinner, true to her word, Mrs. Abernathy showed Olivia to a pleasant corner room on the second floor. It was currently set up as a sewing room, but the housekeeper assured her it would be transformed into a proper bedroom by the following evening. "For tonight, you and the little one can have the guest room," she said, leading Olivia down the hall to a spacious bedroom with a large 4-poster bed and matching cherry wood furniture. "Bathrooms at the end of the hall. We've got indoor plumbing, praise the Lord. Ethan insisted on it when we expanded the house 5 years ago." Olivia's eyes widened in surprise. Indoor plumbing was a luxury even in many Boston homes, let alone on a frontier ranch. "Ethan may look like a rough cowboy, Mrs. Abernathy said with a knowing smile, "but he's got progressive ideas about comfort. Said there was no reason women should be hauling water when pipes could do the job just as well." Later, after Emma was bathed and settled in the center of the big bed surrounded by pillows to prevent her from rolling, Olivia stood at the window, gazing out at the moonlit ranch. The vastness of the land both intimidated and exhilarated her. How different from the crowded streets of Boston, where buildings pressed against each other and the horizon was always blocked by structures of man's making. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Ethan, now dressed in a clean shirt and trousers, his hair damp from washing. "Just wanted to make sure you have everything you need," he said, carefully keeping his eyes at a respectful level and not peering past her into the bedroom. "Yes, thank you," Olivia replied. "Your home is lovely, Mr. Xavier. Far more comfortable than I expected a ranch house to be," he smiled, revealing that charming dimple again. "We're not complete savages out here, Miss Langley, despite what those Eastern papers might say. Some of us even use forks." Olivia laughed softly, conscious of the sleeping baby. "I deserved that. I apologize for any assumptions." "No apology needed." His expression grew more serious. "I want to thank you for accepting the position. Mrs. Abernathy would never admit it, but she's been struggling. Having you here will be a blessing for her." "I'm the one who should be grateful," Olivia said honestly. "You've offered us sanctuary when we had nowhere else to turn." Ethan shook his head. "Not sanctuary, Miss Langley. A home for as long as you choose to make it one." He stepped back, tipping an imaginary hat. "Sleep well. Tomorrow will be soon enough to start learning the ways of Double X." As autumn deepened into winter, Olivia found herself settling into life at Double X with surprising ease. Mrs. Abernathy proved to be a patient teacher, showing her the rhythms and routines of ranch life without criticism or condescension. Emma thrived in the clean air and peaceful surroundings, growing plumper and more alert with each passing day. The East Room had indeed been transformed into a charming bedroom for them, with a cozy bed for Olivia and a handcrafted cradle for Emma that Ethan had produced from the attic. "Made it for my own children someday," he'd explained almost shyly as 2 ranch hands carried it in. "Figured it might as well be used rather than gathering dust." The cradle was a beautiful piece of craftsmanship, with smoothly curved rockers and delicate carvings of woodland animals along its sides. Olivia had been deeply touched by the gesture, particularly when she noticed the care with which Ethan's large hands tested each joint and runner before declaring it safe for Emma's use. As December arrived with its shorter days and longer nights, Olivia found herself looking forward to the evenings when Ethan would join them by the fire after dinner. He would often read aloud from books pulled from his surprisingly extensive library, tales of adventure, historical accounts, or poetry that revealed his unexpected depth and education. On one such evening, as the wind howled outside and snow piled against the windows, Olivia sat in a rocking chair with Emma cradled against her shoulder, the baby's eyelids drooping with contentment. Mrs. Abernathy had retired early, complaining of aching joints that always troubled her when storms approached. Ethan looked up from the volume of Wordsworth he had been reading, his gaze lingering on the picture they made in the firelight. "She's growing so fast," he observed softly. Olivia nodded, her hand gently patting Emma's back. "Almost 7 months now. Soon she'll be crawling and then we'll all be in trouble." "We'll have to make sure the house is ready for an explorer," Ethan said with a smile. He hesitated, then asked, "Would you mind if I held her?" "She'll be asleep soon, and I don't often get the chance when she's calm like this." Olivia rose and carefully transferred the drowsy infant to his waiting arms. Emma stirred, her tiny brow furrowing momentarily before she settled against Ethan's broad chest with a contented sigh. Something shifted in Olivia's heart as she watched this strong man cradle her niece with such tenderness. Over the past weeks, she had come to respect Ethan Xavier for his fairness with his workers, his sharp mind, and his quiet generosity. But seeing him now, humming softly to Emma as her eyes finally closed in sleep, awakened feelings that went beyond respect. "You're very natural with her," Olivia observed, returning to her chair. Ethan's smile was tinged with a hint of melancholy. "I always assumed I'd have a house full of children by now. Life had other plans, it seems." "There's still time," Olivia said before she could stop herself, a blush warming her cheeks at her boldness. Ethan's blue eyes met hers, something unreadable in their depths. "Yes," he said quietly. "I suppose there is." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities until Emma stirred in his arms, breaking the spell. "I should put her down for the night," Olivia said, rising again. Ethan nodded, carefully handing back the sleeping baby. "Of course, it's getting late." As Olivia turned to leave, he spoke again. "Olivia, there's to be a Christmas dance in town next week. I'd be honored if you would accompany me. Mrs. Abernathy has already volunteered to watch Emma for the evening." Olivia paused at the door, her heart suddenly racing. "I'd like that very much, Ethan." His smile lit up his entire face. "Good, that's good." As she climbed the stairs to their room, Olivia acknowledged to herself that something fundamental had changed. In the soft light of the fire, with Emma cradled between them, Ethan Xavier had ceased to be simply her employer. What exactly he had become, she wasn't yet ready to name, but the prospect filled her with a warmth that had nothing to do with the blazing hearth they'd left behind. The night of the Christmas dance arrived crisp and clear, with stars like diamonds scattered across the velvet sky. Olivia stood before the small mirror in her room, nervously smoothing the skirt of her best dress, a dark green silk with modest lace trim at the collar and cuffs. It was the only truly fine garment she had kept from her Boston life, saved for special occasions. A soft knock at her door revealed Mrs. Abernathy, already holding Emma, who was freshly bathed and dressed in a nightgown. "My goodness, don't you look lovely?" the housekeeper exclaimed. "That color suits you beautifully." "Thank you," Olivia said, touching her carefully arranged hair. She had twisted it into an elegant knot with a few soft curls framing her face. "I'm a bit nervous. It's been a long time since I attended any social gathering." "Nonsense, Mrs. Abernathy said briskly. "You'll be the belle of the ball, and Ethan will be proud as a peacock to have you on his arm." She bounced Emma gently. "Now, don't you worry about this little cherub. Grandma Abernathy has everything under control." Olivia smiled at the older woman's self-appointed title. Over the past months, Mrs. Abernathy had indeed become a grandmother figure to Emma, doting on the baby and spending hours singing old lullabies and telling stories, even though Emma was far too young to understand. "I know she'll be perfectly fine with you," Olivia said, leaning down to kiss the baby's forehead. "We won't be too late." "Take your time," Mrs. Abernathy insisted. "Young folks need to dance and laugh, does the soul good." When Olivia descended the stairs, she found Ethan waiting in the entryway, dressed in what was clearly his finest clothing, a well-tailored dark suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, a crisp white shirt, and a string tie. His hair was neatly combed and he'd trimmed his beard to perfect neatness. He looked, Olivia thought with a flutter in her stomach, devastatingly handsome. Ethan, for his part, seemed momentarily struck speechless at the sight of her. "Olivia," he finally managed. "You look absolutely beautiful." "Thank you," she replied, feeling a blush warm her cheeks. "You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Xavier." He offered his arm with a smile. "Shall we?" The ride to Council Bluffs passed quickly, with Ethan pointing out constellations in the winter sky and sharing stories of Christmas celebrations from his childhood. The wagon had been replaced by a sleigh for the winter months, complete with warm blankets and hot bricks wrapped in flannel to keep their feet warm. The town hall had been transformed for the occasion with evergreen boughs, red ribbons, and hundreds of candles that cast a warm glow over the proceedings. A small band played in one corner, and couples already twirled across the wooden floor when they arrived. Ethan Xavier, As I Live and Breathe. A jovial man with an impressive mustache approached them as they entered. "Didn't think we'd see you tonight. You usually avoid these gatherings like they're carrying the plague." Ethan smiled, shaking the man's hand. "Tom, good to see you. May I introduce Miss Olivia Langley?" "Olivia, this is Tom Peterson, owner of the town's newspaper and chief gossip of Council Bluffs." "Slander and defamation," Tom laughed good-naturedly. "I merely report the facts with perhaps a small dose of colorful commentary." He bowed slightly to Olivia. "A pleasure, Miss Langley." "I've heard rumors of a young lady out at XX, but Ethan here has been uncommonly tight-lipped about his new household addition." Before the conversation could continue, the band struck up a lively reel and Ethan turned to Olivia. "Would you care to dance?" "I'd be delighted," she replied, grateful for the escape from Tom's curious gaze. As Ethan led her onto the dance floor, his hand warm at the small of her back, Olivia felt a thrill of excitement. It had been so long since she'd danced, longer still since she'd enjoyed it. But as they joined the other couples and Ethan proved to be a surprisingly graceful partner, she found herself laughing with pure joy. "Where did you learn to dance so well?" she asked as he twirled her expertly. "My mother insisted," he replied with a grin. "Said no son of hers would stomp around a dance floor like a drunken buffalo. She made me practice with Mrs. Abernathy until I could waltz without crushing anyone's toes." The image of a young Ethan dutifully learning to dance with his stern housekeeper made Olivia laugh again. "Well, please convey my compliments to Mrs. Abernathy. Her instruction was clearly effective." They danced several more times, stopping occasionally for refreshments or to chat with Ethan's acquaintances. Olivia noticed the curious glances directed their way clearly. Ethan Xavier arriving with a beautiful young woman on his arm was cause for speculation. But his steady presence beside her made it easy to ignore the whispers. During a pause in the dancing, while Ethan fetched them cups of punch, Olivia found herself approached by a well-dressed older woman with shrewd eyes and a calculating smile. "Miss Langley, is it? I'm Victoria Harrington. My husband owns the bank." The woman's gaze swept over Olivia assessingly. "We've all been quite curious about Ethan's mysterious houseguest, such an unusual arrangement." Olivia straightened her spine, recognizing the implied criticism. "Mr. Xavier kindly offered me employment when I found myself in difficult circumstances. Mrs. Abernathy has been needing assistance for some time." "Yes, I'm sure that's all it is," Mrs. Harrington said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Though I must say, you're rather young and pretty to be merely a housekeeper's assistant and bringing a child into the situation." She let the implication hang in the air. Before Olivia could form a suitably cutting response, Ethan appeared at her side, 2 cups of punch in hand. His expression was pleasant, but Olivia detected a hardness in his eyes as he looked at Mrs. Harrington. "Victoria," he said coolly. "I see you've met Miss Langley." "Indeed," the woman replied. "We were just getting acquainted. Such an interesting story she has." "Olivia's presence at XX has been a blessing," Ethan said firmly. "Mrs. Abernathy adores both her and little Emma. Now, if you'll excuse us, I believe this next dance is ours." Without waiting for a response, he guided Olivia away, setting down their untouched punch on a nearby table. "I apologize for that." he said quietly as they reached the dance floor. Victoria Harrington considers herself the arbiter of social propriety in Council Bluffs. Unfortunately, her definition of propriety is whatever suits her own purposes at the moment. It's all right, Olivia assured him, though the encounter had left her shaken. I'm sure our arrangement does seem unusual to outsiders. Ethan's hand tightened slightly on hers as the band began a waltz. What others think doesn't matter to me, Olivia. Only what you think and how you feel concerns me. There was something in his voice, a depth of feeling that made her heart skip. As they moved together to the gentle rhythm, the rest of the room seemed to fade away until there was only the music, the warmth of his hand at her waist, and the intensity in his blue eyes as they held her gaze. Ethan, she began, not entirely sure what she wanted to say. Let's step outside for a moment, he suggested. It's rather warm in here. The night air was crisp but not unbearably cold as they stepped onto the small porch that fronted the town hall. Stars blanketed the sky and their breath formed small clouds in the still air. Better, Ethan asked, removing his jacket and draping it around her shoulders despite her protests. Yes, thank you. The weight and warmth of his coat enveloped her, carrying with it his scent-clean soap, leather, and something distinctly his own. For a moment they stood in companionable silence, gazing up at the stars. Then Ethan turned to her, his expression serious. Olivia, I need to tell you something, he began. When I offered you a position at XX, my intentions were exactly as stated, to provide Mrs. Abernathy with needed help and to offer you and Emma a safe place to stay while you decided on your next steps. I know that, Ethan, she said softly. What I didn't anticipate, he continued, was how quickly you would become essential to the ranch and to me. He took a deep breath. These past months, watching you with Emma, seeing how you've brought light and warmth back to a house that had grown too quiet. I find myself hoping that your next step might be to stay, permanently. Olivia's heart hammered in her chest. What exactly are you saying, Ethan? He took her hands in his touch gentle but firm. I'm saying that I've fallen in love with you, Olivia Langley. With your strength, your kindness, your determination. I love the way you read to Emma even though she's too young to understand the words. I love how you hum while you work and how you stand up to Mrs. Abernathy when she's being unreasonable. I even love how you insist on making that terrible Boston brown bread that nobody actually enjoys, but we all pretend to because it reminds you of home. A laugh bubbled up through Olivia's tightening throat. It is awful, isn't it? Truly dreadful, he agreed with a grin that quickly softened into seriousness again. But I'd eat it every day for the rest of my life if it meant having you and Emma with me as my family. Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. Ethan, are you proposing? Rather badly, it seems, he said with a self-deprecating smile. But yes, Olivia, I am asking if you would do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife. I promise to love and cherish you always, to be a father to Emma, and to spend every day trying to be worthy of the trust you would place in me. Joy, bright and overwhelming, surged through Olivia. In that moment, all her fears and doubts seemed to dissolve like morning mist under the sun. She had not come west seeking love, only security and a fresh start. But standing here under the stars with this remarkable man, she recognized that love had found her anyway. Yes, she whispered, her voice steadying as she continued. Yes, Ethan Xavier, I will marry you. The smile that lit his face was like sunrise breaking over the prairie. With infinite tenderness, he drew her into his arms and lowered his lips to hers in a kiss that spoke of promises, passion, and a future stretching out before them like the vast Wyoming sky. When they finally parted, both a little breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. We should probably go back inside before people start talking even more than they already are. Olivia laughed softly. Let them talk. I'm too happy to care. Hand in hand, they returned to the dance. But now there was a new awareness between them, a sense of belonging that made every touch, every glance, every shared smile more meaningful. Later, as they drove home through the starlit night, Olivia nestled against Ethan's side beneath the warm blankets of the sleigh. She marveled at the strange turns of fate that had brought her to this moment. A train station in Council Bluffs, a baby in her arms. A cowboy who had offered to hold them both when they most needed support. "What are you thinking?" Ethan asked, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "That sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as disasters," she replied honestly. "If Thomas Wellington had met me at that station as planned, I never would have known you, never would have found this happiness." "Then I'm selfishly glad he didn't," Ethan said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Though I wish you hadn't had to endure such uncertainty and fear." "It was worth it," Olivia said simply. "Every moment led me here to you." The news of their engagement was met with varying reactions at XX. Mrs. Abernathy burst into tears of joy before immediately launching into plans for the wedding, declaring that it must take place before spring roundup consumed everyone's attention. Emma, of course, was oblivious to the momentous change, concerned only with her next meal and the colorful quilt blocks Mrs. Abernathy had begun to stitch together for her crib. The ranch hands were openly pleased, offering hearty congratulations to their boss and shy, respectful nods to Olivia. Several of the older cowboys confided that they'd suspected something was brewing for months, based on the way Ethan's face lit up whenever Olivia entered a room. In town, the reaction was more mixed. Some, like Martha from the boarding house, expressed genuine delight. Others, particularly those like Victoria Harrington who had daughters or nieces of marriageable age, were noticeably cooler. But Ethan and Olivia paid little attention to the gossip, too absorbed in their plans and their growing relationship to concern themselves with others' opinions. They were married on a bright February morning in the small church in Council Bluffs, with Mrs. Abernathy standing as Olivia's matron of honor and Tom Peterson serving as Ethan's best man. Emma, now almost 8 months old and recently mastering the art of sitting unsupported, was placed in a decorated basket near the altar, where she solemnly observed the proceedings while clutching her favorite wooden rattle. Olivia wore a gown of ivory satin that Mrs. Abernathy and Martha had worked on secretly, adapting a dress that had once belonged to Ethan's mother and updating it with new lace and pearl buttons. When she walked down the aisle on Tom Peterson's arm, the newspaper editor having volunteered to give her away, Ethan's face reflected such love and wonder that Olivia felt her heart might burst with happiness. The ceremony was simple but deeply meaningful, with the couple exchanging traditional vows as well as personal promises they had written for each other. Ethan vowed to be not only a loving husband to Olivia, but also a devoted father to Emma, who has claimed a piece of my heart from the first moment I held her. Olivia, in turn, promised to stand beside him through all of life's challenges, grateful every day for the man who offered to hold us when we were most alone, and who continues to hold us with love and strength. There were few dry eyes in the church when the minister pronounced them husband and wife. As Ethan bent to kiss his bride, Emma chose that moment to let out a delighted squeal and bang her rattle enthusiastically, causing laughter to ripple through the congregation. "I believe that's a vote of approval," Ethan said with a grin as they turned to face their friends and neighbors as Mr. and Mrs. Xavier. The celebration continued at XX, where tables had been set up in the main room and a feast prepared under Mrs. Abernathy's exacting supervision. As afternoon turned to evening, there was music and dancing, with Ethan and Olivia sharing their first dance as husband and wife to the same waltz they had danced to at the Christmas ball. "Happy, Mrs. Xavier?" Ethan murmured as they moved across the floor. "Completely," Olivia replied, her heart so full it seemed impossible to contain such joy. "And you, Mr. Xavier?" His answer was in his kiss, gentle but promising, mindful of their audience but unashamed of showing his love for his new wife. Later, after the guests had departed and Mrs. Abernathy had shooed them upstairs with Emma. I'll bring her to you if she wakes, but she'll likely sleep through till morning after all the excitement." Ethan carried Olivia across the threshold of the master bedroom, which had been transformed in preparation for their marriage. The room, previously furnished with only the essentials needed by a bachelor rancher, now boasted new curtains in a soft blue that Olivia had sewn herself, a larger bed with a handcrafted headboard Ethan had made as a surprise wedding gift, and a small cradle near the window for those nights when Emma might need to be close. "Welcome home, my love," Ethan said softly as he set her gently on her feet. Olivia looked around the room that would now be theirs, feeling a sense of rightness and belonging that she had not experienced since long before leaving Boston. "It's perfect," she whispered. Their first night as husband and wife was a tender discovery of each other, with Ethan's reverent touches and whispered words of love guiding Olivia through initial nervousness to passionate abandon. In his arms, she found a completion she had never known was possible, their bodies and hearts joining in a union that transcended physical pleasure. As they lay together afterward, Olivia's head pillowed on Ethan's chest while his fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. She reflected on the strange and wonderful path that had brought her to this moment. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked, pressing a kiss to her hair. "How close I came to missing this," she admitted. "If you hadn't come to the station that day, if you hadn't offered to help a stranger with a baby." "I believe we were meant to find each other," Ethan said with quiet conviction. "Some things are written in the stars, Olivia. I think our love was one of them." Spring arrived at XX in a burst of wildflowers and newborn calves, the land awakening from winter's slumber with vibrant energy. Olivia, now thoroughly settled into her role as mistress of the ranch, found each day bringing new joys and challenges. Emma, just past her first birthday, had mastered walking and was now intent on exploring every corner of the ranch house, kept from danger by the vigilant eyes of her mother, father, and doting Grandma Abernathy. Her first word had been "Papa," uttered one evening as Ethan carried her on his shoulders around the corral, showing her the new foals. The look of wonder and love on his face had brought tears to Olivia's eyes. Life settled into pleasant rhythms marked by the seasons and the needs of the ranch. Ethan continued to expand his operations, guided by Olivia's unexpected head for business. Her father, she had finally shared, had been a successful merchant in Boston before losses in the Panic of '73 had wiped out the family fortune, leading to his early death from heart failure and leaving Olivia and her sister in reduced circumstances. "He taught me about ledgers and inventories from the time I could add simple sums," she explained one evening as they reviewed the ranch accounts together. "He always said a woman should understand money matters, regardless of whether society approved." With Olivia's help, XX began to diversify beyond cattle, adding sheep and expanding their horse breeding program. They hired additional hands, built a larger bunkhouse, and even began planning a small schoolhouse for the children of their workers and neighboring ranches. In the summer of 1877, just over a year after their wedding, Olivia discovered she was expecting their first child. The news filled Ethan with a joy that seemed to radiate from him like physical heat, and he took to placing his hand on her still flat belly at every opportunity, as if to reassure himself that this miracle was real. "I hope it's a boy," he said one evening as they sat on the porch swing, watching Emma chase fireflies in the yard under Mrs. Abernathy's watchful eye. "A little brother for Emma. You just want someone to teach your cowboy ways," Olivia teased, leaning against his shoulder. "Well, I'll teach Emma too if she wants to learn," Ethan replied with a grin. "But mostly I just want a house full of children with your spirit and determination. And your kindness," Olivia added softly, "your generous heart." Their son, William Ethan Xavier, arrived on a crisp February morning in 1878, almost exactly 2 years after their wedding. He had his father's blue eyes and a shock of dark hair that stood straight up no matter how it was combed. Emma, now nearly 2.5, regarded her new brother with solemn interest before declaring him small and asking if he could play horses yet. "Not for a while, sweetheart," Ethan explained, lifting her onto his lap so she could get a better look at the baby in Olivia's arms. "But soon he'll be big enough to play all sorts of games with you. You're his big sister," Olivia added. "That's a very important job. You'll need to help us teach him things and keep him safe." Emma considered this seriously before nodding. "I help," she declared with the decisive confidence of a toddler. As William grew from infant to toddler and Emma from toddler to little girl, the Xavier family flourished. Double X continued to prosper, becoming one of the most successful ranches in western Iowa. Ethan's progressive ideas about cattle breeding and land management earned him respect throughout the region, while Olivia's involvement with the town's newly formed Ladies' Auxiliary helped establish a proper school and the beginnings of a small library. In 1880, they welcomed twins, a boy and a girl named James, and Rose, completing their family with joyous chaos. Emma, now a responsible 5-year-old, took her role as eldest sibling very seriously, helping with the babies and proudly escorting William to his first day of school when the time came. Through the years, Ethan and Olivia's love deepened and matured, weathering the inevitable challenges of life with grace and determination. There were difficult times, droughts that threatened the herds, harsh winters that tested their resources, and the heartbreaking loss of Mrs. Abernathy to pneumonia when the twins were 3. But through it all, they remained each other's strength and solace, their partnership a foundation that supported not only their family but the entire community that had grown up around Double X. On their 10th anniversary, Ethan surprised Olivia with a small gold locket containing miniature portraits of their 4 children: Emma, whom he had formally adopted soon after their marriage, William, James, and Rose. "10 years ago, you made me the happiest man alive by becoming my wife," he said as he fastened the chain around her neck. "Every day since has been a gift." Olivia touched the locket reverently. "Do you ever think about that day at the station? How different our lives might have been if you hadn't stopped to help a stranded woman with a baby." Ethan drew her into his arms, his blue eyes as warm and loving as they had been on their wedding day. "I thank God every day for guiding me there at exactly the right moment. For giving me the courage to say those words. Let me hold you both," Olivia whispered, completing the memory. "The best words I ever spoke," Ethan agreed, lowering his lips to hers in a kiss that held the tenderness of their beginning and the depth of a decade's love. "Because holding you and our children has been the greatest joy of my life." Standing on the porch of the home they had built together, surrounded by the evidence of their shared dreams, the prosperous ranch, the laughter of their children playing in the yard, the community they had helped to shape, Olivia felt a sense of completion that transcended anything she could have imagined on that frightening day in Council Bluffs. What had begun with abandonment and despair had transformed into a life of love, purpose, and belonging, all because a kind-hearted cowboy had offered his hands and his heart when she needed them most. As the setting sun painted the prairie in gold and crimson, Ethan's arms tightened around her waist. "Happy anniversary, my love," he murmured against her hair. "Happy anniversary," Olivia replied, turning in his embrace to face him. "Thank you for holding us, Ethan. Then and now and all the days between." His smile, still capable of making her heart skip after all these years, was answer enough. In that smile was the promise of all the days yet to come, days they would face together, holding each other through whatever joys and sorrows life might bring. From that first meeting on a train platform to this moment of quiet celebration, theirs was a love story written not in grand gestures but in countless small acts of devotion. A story that had begun with the simple offer to hold a stranger and her baby, and had grown into a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone, in their children, in the land they had nurtured, and in the hearts of all whose lives they had touched. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Olivia sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for unanswered telegrams and unexpected meetings, for all the twists of fate that had led her to this man, this life, this love that had saved them both.